Have you ever tried to keep everything within your reach, arranging every small detail of your life as if, by being careful enough, nothing could ever slip out of orbit, only to find that the tighter you hold on, the faster everything slides away? There are days when you wake up and the air in the room feels heavier than usual, as if overnight the familiar world has quietly shifted its place, and you no longer know where you are standing in your own life. Have you ever felt as if life were a room collapsing around you, pieces of the wall falling, dust rising thick in the air, and you standing in the middle, not knowing whether to hold on to the door, cling to the table, or try to save some small keepsake before everything shatters? That feeling is not loud like a storm. It is quiet, lingering, like a faint crack in the wall that you know, sooner or later, will break open. You once believed that if you worked hard enough, tried hard enough, were kind enough, everything would be fine. You made plans for the future, sketched out milestones, told yourself that if you walked the right path, every door would open in order. And then one day, you received a short message telling you that you no longer had a job, or a cold conversation in the kitchen made you realize that the relationship you trusted had been fractured for a long time. And every plan once written in bold ink suddenly felt as fragile as words written on sand. Losing a job is not just losing income. It is the feeling that your worth has been quietly questioned. You look into the mirror and ask yourself where you went wrong, what you lacked, where you were not enough. The days that follow move slowly. You send out applications, you wait for replies, and each time your phone stays silent, you feel a small piece of your confidence quietly fall away. A fractured family hurts even more. It is not always loud arguments. Sometimes it is the long silence at the dinner table, the way eyes avoid each other, the short and distant replies. You remember the days that once felt warm and wonder what changed, or whether it was you who changed. You try to mend things, you soften your words, you hold back a little more, but there are distances that cannot be closed by the effort of one person alone. Broken plans carry with them a deep sense of being lost. You once believed you clearly saw the road ahead, even felt proud that you had control over every step. Yet with just one unexpected turn, you find yourself standing at a crossroads with no map in your hands. Others may look at you and say that everything will be fine, but they are not inside your long nights. They do not hear the thoughts that circle endlessly in your mind. There were nights when you prayed, whispering into the dark, hoping for a small sign that things would change. You waited for a door to open, a small miracle, a clear explanation. But when morning came, everything was the same. No answer, no special sign. Just another day that looked exactly like the one before. And that silence can be more exhausting than the storm itself. Perhaps what frightens you most is not the pain, but the feeling that you are no longer in control. When you still have control, even hardship feels manageable. You feel as though your hands are on the wheel, but when everything slips beyond your reach, you feel like someone sitting in a small boat on an open sea. The waves are not violent, but they are enough to unsteady you, and you have no idea where the shore is. So you try harder. You try to think more positively. You work more diligently. You try to stay calmer. You tell yourself that if you can just be a little stronger, everything will fall back into place. But deep down, you know you are tired. That exhaustion is not in your body. It is in your mind, stretched tight, constantly bracing itself to keep everything from falling apart again. There are moments when you simply want to stop, but you are afraid that if you loosen your grip even a little, everything will collapse completely. You believe you have to be the steady one for your family, the one who cannot fall, the one who solves the problems. And so you keep holding yourself together, even as cracks begin to form inside cracks that only you can truly see. The truth is, we rarely admit that we fear losing control more than we fear suffering. Suffering can be explained, it can be told as a story, it can be comforted by others. But losing control makes us feel small, powerless, no longer the main character in our own story, and that feeling touches something very deep within us. Some people hide their helplessness by becoming busier than ever. Some grow cold, as if nothing matters anymore. Some laugh more, talk more, but when they return home, they sit quietly in the dark. Each person faces it differently. But behind it all is the same fear that if we do not hold on tightly, life will slip through our hands forever. Maybe you have wondered why you feel so exhausted, even though the crisis itself has already passed. Maybe you thought the pain had softened, yet the heaviness remains. You believe you are struggling with your circumstances, but in truth, you are struggling with the need to control them. And then, in a rare, quiet moment, when you no longer have the strength to think any further, you begin to realize something gentle, yet very real. Perhaps what has exhausted you is not the events that happened, not the job you lost, not the relationship that fractured, and not even the prayer that seemed unanswered. Perhaps what has exhausted you is the effort to control what was never yours to control. There is a very deep place within every human heart that longs to know what will happen tomorrow. We want to see the future the way we see a printed map, where every turn has a clear sign, where no surprise is big enough to make our hearts skip a beat. Our sense of safety seems to come from believing that we have calculated enough, prepared enough, anticipated every possibility. We make plans for 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We set goals, write notes, break things down into careful steps to make sure that if we do everything right, the results will come exactly as we hope. Every decision is weighed, every risk is minimized. Deep down, we believe that if we are wise enough, careful enough, life will follow the path we have drawn. No one wants to be hurt, so we try to control other people's emotions as well. We try to be good enough so no one will leave us, perfect enough so no one will be disappointed in us, strong enough so no one will see our weakness. We believe that if we do everything right, no one will have a reason to wound us. But life does not move according to our perfect plans. There are things that happen beyond every prediction, beyond every calculation, beyond every effort to control. And when they happen, we do not only suffer because of the event itself, we suffer because of our own helplessness. A mother may read hundreds of books about raising a child, stay up through the night to watch over her child's sleep, do everything within her power. But when a doctor speaks of an illness she cannot heal, all her knowledge, all her effort suddenly feels small. She realizes that love alone is not always enough to control what happens. A man may try to repair his marriage with apologies, changes, quiet sacrifices. He once believed that if he were patient enough, sincere enough, everything would return to the way it was. But some cracks were formed long ago, and one day he must face the truth that not every relationship can be saved by the effort of one side alone. There are young people who were once talented, once full of promise, once certain their future would be bright. They studied diligently, built their image, pursued their dreams with all their passion. And then, a failure, an unexpected event, a wrong decision leaves them lost. They look back at their path and wonder why everything did not unfold according to the plan they had drawn. Control sometimes gives us the illusion that we are masters of our lives, but in truth, We are only holding very small pieces in a picture far greater than we can see. We can choose our response. We can choose our attitude, but we cannot control every outcome, every person, every circumstance. The desire to control often grows out of fear, fear of being abandoned, fear of failure, fear of losing what we love. And to soothe that fear, we try to turn ourselves into the command center of everything, as if by being alert enough, strong enough, we could keep the whole world from shaking. But when we try to become the god of our own lives, the burden becomes too heavy. We feel responsible for every outcome. We feel the need to explain every disappointment. We blame ourselves whenever something collapses. We forget that there are forces far beyond human control. Some things fall apart not to punish us, and not to prove that we are inadequate. Some things fall apart simply because we are not the center of the universe. We cannot control another person's heartbeat. We cannot control time. We cannot control every event unfolding around us. That truth can leave us unsettled, because if we are not the one controlling everything, then who are we in this story? We are used to believing that if we try hard enough, everything will be fine. But life does not always operate by such simple rules of reward and punishment. When we realize that control is an illusion, we may feel empty. The supports we once leaned on begin to shake, yet it is in that emptiness that we start to see our limits more clearly. Not to be discouraged, but to be honest with ourselves. We begin to understand that we are only human, human with limits, with fatigue, with days when we do not have enough strength, and that does not make us less valuable. It simply makes us more realistic about our place in this vast world. Some things fall apart so that we can stop believing we must carry everything. Some things do not unfold according to our will to remind us that there are greater currents moving, even when we cannot see them. When we stop trying to be the center of everything, we can begin to learn how to live more lightly. And perhaps, in our quietest moments, we slowly accept that we are not the one controlling the entire story. We are only a part of it, a small part, limited, yet still meaningful. When we understand that, we no longer have to strain ourselves trying to be the god of our own lives. There was a very dark night in the story of Jesus, a night without crowds, without miracles, without words of praise, only a quiet garden and a man who knew exactly what was waiting for him ahead. Not uncertainty, not misunderstanding. He knew clearly that the road before him would lead to pain, humiliation, and death. In that Garden of Gethsemane, every illusion of control seemed to fade away. If there had ever been a moment when he could have changed his circumstances by power, this would have been it. Yet instead of doing so, he chose to remain in the darkness, facing a very real human fear. He did not walk into that night as someone untouched by trembling. Sorrow covered him so heavily that Scripture describes his soul as sorrowful even unto death. Loneliness was there as well, when those closest to him could not stay awake, could not fully share that burden. There was no halo in that moment, only fragility. What makes that night so close to us is his honesty. He did not deny his fear. He did not claim that he did not hurt. He did not convince himself that everything was easy. He prayed. He expressed the desire to be spared from the bitter cup that was coming. And then those words were spoken, not like a triumphant slogan, but like a deep and steady breath. Not my will, but yours be done. It was not the voice of someone without a choice. It was the voice of someone who could have chosen otherwise, yet chose to let go. Letting go here was not passivity. It was not folding his arms before fate. It was the surrender of control from human, limited hands into the hands of the infinite. It was the acknowledgement that there is a greater will, a deeper plan that human eyes cannot fully see. In that garden, he did not pretend to be strong. He did not hide his emotions, and that revealed weakness became an uncommon strength. Because to let go in fear, in tears, in loneliness, is far more courageous than pretending to be untouchable. Perhaps what moves us most is the silence that followed that prayer. No angel came to erase the circumstance. No alternative path was opened. After praying, he rose and stepped forward into what he already knew awaited him, not because the fear had disappeared, but because faith had grown greater than fear. Letting go did not stop the storm. It did not immediately change the situation, but it changed the position of his heart within the storm. Instead of standing at the center trying to control everything, he placed himself in trust, not abandoning responsibility, but abandoning the illusion of control. When he was arrested, when he was tried, when he was misunderstood, he no longer tried to twist events back in his favor. The road that led up to Golgotha was not the road of power as the world understands it. It was the road of someone who had released the need to save himself at all costs. On the cross, in the midst of pain and humiliation, Jesus still spoke forgiveness. The circumstances were completely beyond his control in any human sense, but love was not. While he could not control what others were doing to him, he could still choose how he would love. That shows us that letting go is not defeat. It is not losing everything. It is shifting the focus from preserving life on our own terms to preserving love to the very end. There are things we cannot change, but there is always one thing we can keep: our heart. The image of that night in the garden reminds us that true surrender is not blind acceptance of fate. It is trusting that a greater meaning is unfolding, even when we do not understand it. Trusting not because everything is clear, but because we choose to place our hearts into hands greater than our own. That moment became the center of the story, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet. A prayer, a release, a step forward into what could not be avoided. And in that very surrender, another kind of strength was born, the strength of faith. Perhaps when we look at the Garden of Gethsemane, we do not see a king victorious in the earthly sense. We see a man trembling, yet remaining, a man who prayed, yet did not run. And there, we begin to understand that letting go is not losing everything, but placing our life into hands wider and greater than our own. There are moments when we think faith is an anchor that keeps us steady in the storm, as if believing strongly enough will calm the sea, silence the wind, and bring everything back to the way we want it to be. But when the waves keep rising, when the wind keeps blowing, we begin to feel unsettled. We quietly wonder if we have not held on tightly enough, if we have not believed deeply enough. Without realizing it, we turn faith into a tool for controlling outcomes. Yet there is a gentler truth waiting to be understood. Faith is not a hand clenching tightly around life, but a hand open in the middle of what we cannot hold. It is not a strength that makes you feel less pain. It is a presence that keeps you from hurting alone. When everything feels out of control, we often react by trying harder, trying to explain, trying to fix, trying to find a way out. We think that if we loosen our grip, everything will fall apart faster. But sometimes, it is the gripping itself that leaves us exhausted. Jesus did not come to teach people how to control their circumstances. He did not hand them a formula to escape suffering. He stepped into their lives, sat beside those who were pushed aside, touched the wounds society wanted to avoid. He was there, in the chaos, not standing at a distance trying to control it. Seen this way, faith is not a shield that blocks every wound. It is a whisper that you are not alone in your hardest hours. It does not promise that you will never cry, but it promises that your tears do not fall into empty space. There are people who have prayed for a long time, and yet their circumstances remain unchanged. The illness is still there. The relationship is still broken. The door is still closed. And they wonder what their faith is for. Perhaps the answer is not found in how quickly the situation changes, but in how their hearts are held within it. Letting go does not mean neglect. It is not sitting still and allowing everything to drift away. Letting go is admitting that there are limits you cannot cross by willpower alone. It is daring to say, I am not enough, not strong enough, not wise enough, not powerful enough to turn everything according to your own will. Those words are not defeat, they are honesty. And sometimes that honesty opens a new space within you, where you no longer have to play the hero who saves everything, where you are allowed to be weak, allowed to be tired, allowed not to understand it all. When you stop trying to hold everything so tightly, you begin to sense a gentle presence that does not leave you, not like a loud miracle, but like a slower breath in your chest, like a pause in the middle of tangled thoughts, like a small light that does not drive away the darkness at once, but is enough to keep you from panic. Faith is not a declaration that everything will turn out the way you hope. It is trust that even when things are not fine, you are still held in a love greater than your fear. And that love does not demand that you be strong before you come near. Maybe you are used to proving that you are okay, proving that you are in control, proving that you are strong enough to get through. But perhaps there is another way to keep walking, not by tightening yourself, but by opening your heart. Perhaps faith does not begin when you are certain. It begins when you admit your helplessness, not as self-blame, but as surrender. When you say, I do not know what to do anymore, it may not be the end. It may be another door opening quietly. In the middle of unanswered questions, in the space where explanations have not come, you do not need to solve everything at once. You only need to allow yourself to stop trying to control it all. Stop blaming yourself for not fixing everything. Stop believing that every burden must rest on your shoulders. If you are exhausted from trying to keep everything from falling, perhaps what you need is not more strength, but more gentleness toward yourself. Perhaps today, instead of tightening your grip, you can try setting it down, not because you are giving up, but because you trust that you are not carrying it alone. And in the quiet after you set it down, you may discover something small yet deeply real. You are still being held, not by your control, but by a love that does not depend on whether you are strong enough or not. There are afternoons when the sunlight touches the surface of the sea, and everything seems to slow down for a moment. The waves are still moving, the wind is still blowing. Yet in that brief space, a person can sit quietly and gaze at the distant horizon without saying a word, without explaining what has happened, without recounting how heavy the past days have been. The image of someone sitting before the sea is not the image of failure. It is simply a human being who has gone through too many attempts, too many efforts to keep everything standing. Hands that once clenched tightly now rest open on their knees. Shoulders that once carried tension slowly release themselves to the rhythm of the wind. There are times when you no longer have the strength to analyze where you went wrong, no strength to create a new plan, no strength to tell yourself to be more positive. All that remains is silence. And that silence is not as frightening as you once thought. It is only the pause your heart has needed for a very long time. The sea does not ask the one sitting there to be stronger. The sunset does not demand that they fix their life before the sun goes down. The wind does not require them to prove anything. Everything simply exists, wide and generous, as if to say that you may sit down without having to perform any role at all. Perhaps you are used to getting back up the moment you fall, fixing things the moment they crack, searching for answers the moment a question appears. But there are days when the only thing you can do is breathe. And sometimes breathing is enough. When you have no strength left, you do not need another sermon, another piece of advice. You only need a space wide enough that your heart is not forced to keep working. A space where you are allowed to be weak without being judged. Maybe your life right now is falling in ways you never expected. Work is no longer what it was. A relationship is no longer whole. The things you once trusted no longer feel steady. It feels like standing at the edge of a slope, watching everything slip through your hands. But in the middle of all that, you do not have to rush to gather every broken piece at once. You do not have to prove that you are still in control. Some things need time. Some things need silence before they can be understood. You do not have to be strong. You do not have to pretend you are fine. You do not have to smile when your heart is weary. Weakness does not make you smaller. It simply shows that you are human, with limits and days of exhaustion. Perhaps you fear that if you stop, everything will collapse completely. But sometimes it is the constant tension that breaks you apart. Pausing is not surrender. It is the way you protect what is left of yourself from being drained even further. Imagine yourself sitting before the sea, watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon. You cannot hold the light in place. You cannot prevent the darkness from coming. But you can remain there, witnessing the transition without panic. You can trust that beyond the darkness, dawn still has its path. If today your life feels like it is falling apart, you do not have to fix it immediately. You do not have to find every answer before night arrives. You only need to allow yourself to remain in this moment, even if it is not perfect. If today you feel that you have reached your limit, you do not have to prove how much more you can endure. You only need not to run away, not to run from the truth of your own emotions, not to run from the gentle presence that is still very near. There is a love that does not wait until you have repaired everything. It comes while you are still scattered. It does not wait for you to become strong before staying beside you. It is there when you sit before the sea, when the wind moves through your hair, when the sunset rests upon your tired shoulders. And if today your life feels like it is falling apart, you do not have to fix it right away. You do not have to be strong. You only need not to run from the love that is still waiting for you.